By late October, Steve Fletcher's truck smelled like wet canvas, iodine, and old coffee no amount of air freshener could beat. 15 years in wildlife response for Bitterroot County had turned his days into a string of unpredictable calls stitched together by radio static. At 8 that morning, he'd helped a deputy drag a mule deer off Highway 12 before commuters started treating it like a speed bump. At noon, he'd climbed behind Hamilton Elementary with a crate and heavy gloves to collect 2 fox kits that had crawled under a portable classroom. At 3:30, he'd been on the shoulder of Highway 86, tagging a black bear cub struck by a logging truck and trying not to watch the sow circle the tree line 50 yards off, moaning low in her throat. He knew Highway 86 the way some men knew prayer, by repetition, by ruin, by memory. Mile marker 17 flooded every spring. Marker 33 iced first because the road bent in permanent shade. Marker 41, where the guardrail thinned and the ditch road dropped toward old timber cuts, had been a problem since before he started. Too narrow for the traffic that used it, too tempting after dark for drivers who thought 2 lanes in the mountains worked like an interstate. A county commissioner once called it a manageable risk corridor. Steve called it where he kept finding taillights in ravines. Just after sunset, the first hard sleet of the season started tapping the windshield in thin, metallic clicks. Frost silvered the shoulders and made every reflective post flash in his headlights like teeth. Steve had just pulled into the county yard to swap tranquilizer cartridges when dispatch broke over Channel 3, clipped and urgent. Unit Wild 1, copy rollover MVC, Highway 86 near mile marker 41. 1 adult located, child unaccounted for, possible ejection, fire and law en route. He didn't bother answering with words. He just keyed twice and turned back out, tires spitting gravel. By the time he reached 41, the night had gone from wet to hostile. Red and blue strobes flashed off sleet so hard they seemed to hang in the air. Troopers had blocked both lanes, and a state DOT plow idled at an angle, its amber lights spinning over a wrecked silver SUV resting on its side against the ditch embankment. One wheel still turned, slow and pointless. Glass glittered across the asphalt. A pink child's booster seat lay upside down near the shoulder, rain filling the cup holder. Deputies were already fanning through the tree line with handheld lights, calling a name in repeating intervals that told Steve this had moved past confusion and into fear. "Eli! Eli Fletcher!" one shouted, then corrected himself, breathless. "Eli Mercer! Sheriff's office! Answer if you hear me!" A paramedic team worked over the driver, a woman in her 30s with blood matting her hair, strapped to a board inside the open ambulance. Her face was shock grey under the floodlights. Steve caught only fragments as he moved past. Possible concussion, BP dropping, keep her talking. A deputy in a rain shell jogged over and grabbed Steve's sleeve before he could reach the command vehicle. Thank God. We got a wolf. Steve blinked sleet from his eyelashes. A wolf where? Right there, big grey, won't leave. He followed the deputy's light and saw it immediately. Not in the ditch. Not near the body fluid absorbent already spread around the driver's side door. The animal stood in the open, 30 feet from the wreck, in and out of the pulsing emergency lights like it was flickering between worlds. Large female by build, thick winter coat darkened by rain, ears forward, tail low but not tucked. It paced a tight oval around a specific patch of blacktop near where the SUV had first struck, then stopped, looked toward the dark slope above the road, and gave a short, sharp bark. Not a howl, not a challenge. A bark, almost impatient. 2 troopers shouted and advanced with their arms wide, the standard move-it-off posture they used on black bears in campgrounds. The wolf skipped backward, out of reach, circled, and returned to the same spot. Been doing that 10 minutes, the deputy said. Keeps coming back. Steve watched another cycle. Same pattern. Circle, stop, look uphill, bark once. Circle again. It never approached the wreck, never lowered its head to the blood, never tested the open ambulance, even with all the human noise and scent. One of the troopers cursed and reached for a flare. Need this thing gone now. Hold, Steve said, sharper than he meant. He took a slow step forward, hands visible, posture neutral. The wolf fixed him with pale amber eyes, then turned her head uphill again, body rigid for 2 seconds like a compass needle finding north. Someone behind him muttered, "It's waiting for us to turn our backs." Another deputy answered, "Or waiting for that woman to die." Steve ignored both. He crouched and touched the asphalt where the wolf had paced. Rainwater ran in thin streams toward the ditch. No obvious scent marker. No meat. No roadkill scraps. Just fresh tire gouges and a shallow drag pattern where debris had slid. Inside the ambulance, the injured mother jerked awake with a sharp intake of breath that cut through the sirens. A medic leaned over her. "Mom, stay with me. What's your name?" "Lena," she whispered, then louder, panicked. "Where's Eli? Where is he?" The medic's eyes moved to the nearest deputy. Steve saw that tiny transfer of dread before anyone spoke. "Ma'am, we're looking for him now," the medic said. "How old is Eli?" 6. He was... She coughed, winced, then tried to sit against straps. "He was behind me, in his seat. He had his dinosaur blanket. He was crying. Then we spun..." Her voice broke. "Don't tell me you don't have him." Every conversation on the roadside thinned and shifted toward that ambulance. A missing child wasn't abstract anymore. It had a name, an age, and a blanket with dinosaurs on it. The sleet got louder on metal. Command moved faster after that. Sheriff Danvers arrived in person, coat unzipped over his vest, hat brim dripping. He listened to updates with his jaw set, then started assigning grids from the hood of a cruiser, where a map was weighed down by a trauma bag and a flashlight. Teams were sent downslope first toward the creek drainage. Somebody had reported small prints near the ditch road. Thermal drone was requested, but delayed by weather. Search and rescue volunteers were 10 minutes out. A K9 unit was 40 minutes away from Missoula if roads held. "Child in wet conditions, no cold gear, probable injury," Danvers said. "We're on the clock." Steve stood at the edge of the map light, watching the wolf in his peripheral vision. Still circling, still looking upslope between passes. He spoke when there was a pause. "Sheriff, I want one team to check above the road cut. Maintenance trail to Old Culvert Line." Danvers didn't look up. "Why?" "Wolf keeps orienting there. Repeatedly." That got him a full stare. "You're telling me to redirect a child search based on wolf behavior?" "I'm telling you it isn't scavenging behavior. It's displacement and signaling. Could have tracked movement from the crash. We should at least clear the slope." A lieutenant gave a humorless laugh. "Signaling. Steve, with respect, it's a predator standing in an active scene." "Exactly," Steve said. "And it's not acting like one." Danvers turned to the deputy who'd first flagged it. "Has it approached personnel?" "No, sir." "Any attempts toward the patient?" "No, sir." Danvers looked back at Steve. "Doesn't matter. We have civilians coming in, volunteers, maybe family. I'm not running a search with a wolf loose at center point." As if summoned by the word civilians, 2 vehicles nosed up to the outer barricade with local news logos on the doors. A cameraman jumped out in a weather cover, lens already up. Another reporter stood in sleet with her hood down and talked into a mic while pointing toward the flashing lights. Steve couldn't hear her, but he could read the shape of the story from 50 yards away. Crash, missing child, wolf at scene. Fear travelled faster than weather. Danvers saw it too. His shoulders tightened. "Ranch phones are already lit up from scanner traffic," he said to no one and everyone. "I've got people asking if they should keep kids inside because we've got an aggressive pack on the highway." "Pack?" Steve said. "There's one animal. Public won't hear the distinction tonight." A trooper approached with a shotgun, loaded for beanbag rounds, uncertainty plain in his expression. "Sir, if this goes south—" Danvers lifted a hand. "No live rounds unless immediate threat." Then to Steve, "You have 10 minutes. Sedate it, relocate it. Do whatever wildlife does. But remove it from this scene. After that, law enforcement handles it." 10 minutes. In sleet. With the light failing, footprints washing out, a 6-year-old somewhere in Black Timber, and the one odd data point in front of them about to be eliminated for optics. Steve nodded once because arguing the order in open command would only waste more time. "I need a long catch pole, 2 flare sticks, and room." He moved to his truck, pulled a tranquilizer rifle from the lock case, and checked the preloaded dart by touch. He hated using chemical restraint this close to road crews and steep terrain. If the wolf ran sedated into the wrong gully, they'd lose it till morning, or find it broken. He slung the rifle but didn't shoulder it. Instead, he scanned the road edge, mapped angles, and asked a deputy to place temporary snare poles in a loose corridor that could channel movement without trapping. Non-lethal, visible barriers. A compromise. He stepped out again and watched the wolf complete another loop. Circle. Stop. Look uphill. Bark. He tracked her line of sight this time beyond the guardrail break, past dripping fir trunks and a tangle of vine maple that looked too dense to bother with in a first-pass search. There was an old maintenance path up there, barely more than a mud scar cut years ago for culvert inspections. Most responders ignored it because it seemed to dead-end into slash piles. What if it didn't dead-end? What if a child in a booster had been thrown or crawled upward in panic instead of downhill toward water? What if everyone was following the most probable map while the truth sat in the least convenient terrain? A volunteer team came up in orange parkas and checked in. One of them, a school custodian Steve recognized from town, asked quietly, "Is it true there's a wolf?" He glanced toward the flashing lights, then back. "My wife saw on Facebook they might shoot it." Steve didn't answer, not because he didn't know, but because he did. He keyed his radio. "Command, Wild One, requesting 2 searchers to sweep up a slope above marker 41, from sheared rail post to maintenance line. 10-minute check only." Static. Then Danvers. "Denied at this time. Continue animal removal." Steve exhaled through his nose and kept his eyes on the wolf. Her coat was soaked now. She shook once, hard, then resumed pacing. Every movement tighter with agitation as sirens rose and fell behind her. She barked again, short, clipped, almost scolding, and snapped her head uphill. From the ambulance, Lena Mercer's voice cut through rain in a raw, cracked plea no one could mistake. "Please find my boy, please." That was the stake laid bare. A child whose body temperature could be dropping by the minute. A mother conscious enough to remember his blanket, and a thin, stubborn animal everyone wanted gone because it made no sense in a scene that demanded certainty. Steve felt another stake under it. Quieter but real. The line between response and reaction, between doing the safe-looking thing and doing the right one. If he sedated the wolf now and she had been the only signal pointing to Eli, he'd be the man who erased the trail. He lowered the tranquilizer rifle, clicked the safety on, and made his choice. "Copy all units," he said into the radio, voice steady despite the sleet stinging his face. "Wild One initiating controlled displacement. I'm tracking movement upslope. Request 1 deputy shadow me at distance." Danvers came back instantly, hard. "Wild One, that is not the assigned grid." Steve watched the wolf pause at the guardrail break, waiting, eyes fixed on the dark above the road. "Then assign it," he said, "because if that kid is up there, we don't have another 10 minutes to argue." For 3 full seconds, all Steve heard was sleet ticking against his jacket hood and the low diesel rumble of the plow truck. Then Danvers answered, voice tight enough to cut wire. "Wild One, hold position. Do not freelance this operation." Steve didn't move his gaze from the wolf. "I'm not freelancing. I'm following behavior in real time." A different voice jumped in. Lieutenant Harper, clipped and irritated. "You were given a lawful directive to remove the animal." "And I said I'm displacing it," Steve shot back. "It keeps orienting to the same slope. If I can move with it, we can clear that sector." Static. Then Danvers again. "You want my badge on this, Fletcher?" "Fine, you get 1 deputy. No heroics. 8 minutes and I pull you back." "Copy," Steve said immediately, before anyone else could talk him out of it. "Need a deputy with floodlamp." Boots crunched behind him. "I'm with him," came a younger voice. Deputy Nate Barlow, broad-shouldered, rain dripping off his patrol cap. He had a handheld spot and a sidearm strapped high under his shell, like he expected both cold and chaos. Danvers came over loud enough for nearby crews to hear. "Barlow, you stay on Fletcher's shoulder. If that wolf closes distance, you pull him out. Nobody shoots unless I call it." "Copy." Steve lowered the tranquilizer rifle against his chest and stepped toward the guardrail break, palms out, posture loose. The wolf tracked him, ears pricked, then backed upslope 3 strides as if preserving space. She turned, looked uphill, looked back at him, then moved again. "Easy," Steve murmured, more for Barlow than for the animal. They crossed the shoulder where slush had already turned pink-grey from road grit and emergency runoff. Up close, the sheared guardrail post looked freshly torn, steel bent like soft tin where the SUV had hit and spun. The ditch road dropped away left toward creek drainage, the direction every map and instinct favored. The hillside above them rose steep and black, threaded with alder and blown-down branches. The wolf didn't go downhill. She slipped through a gap in vine maple 10 yards above, stopped and glanced back. Barlow swore under his breath. "It's waiting for us." "It's monitoring us," Steve said. "Same difference when teeth are involved." They climbed. Mud gave under Steve's boots, slick with sleet. He used one hand on exposed roots, the other keeping the rifle angled down. Behind them, lights from the crash scene pulsed through trees like distant lightning. Voices faded, replaced by wind and the hiss of freezing rain through fir needles. On the radio, command chatter kept spilling over itself. "Grid Charlie at Creek Line, negative visual. Copy, continue downstream 200 yards. News crew trying to cross tape at North Barricade. Keep them back." Steve keyed his mic while climbing. "Wild One to command, advancing up a slope from rail shear point. Wolf remains ahead, non-aggressive." No response. Just static and another unit calling in from the drainage below. He pushed through a cedar branch and found a narrow cut in the hillside, barely visible under dead leaves. The old maintenance path he'd mentioned. It had once been graded for culvert access. Now it was just a slick ribbon climbing toward darkness. The wolf stood on it, maybe 15 yards up, body angled sideways so she could watch both men and the road below. Her chest rose fast from exertion, steam barely visible in the cold. She gave that same short bark and stepped uphill again. Barlow shone his light around, beam jumping across trunks. "I don't like this. 0 visibility, 1 hostile animal, and everybody else is where we're not." Steve crouched near a muddy patch on the edge of the path. No clear, small prints. Sleet had chewed everything to mush. But there were slide marks, fresh, as if something had scrambled or been dragged by gravity from the road edge. He touched the mud, still glossy, not rain-set. He stood. We keep going. Barlow grabbed his sleeve. Fletcher, I need to ask this once. If it charges? I dart if I have a clean shot. And if you don't? Then we back down and you use your sidearm only if it's on us. Barlow stared at him, searching for certainty Steve couldn't honestly give. Finally, he nodded once. They moved again, slower now. Twice Steve lost sight of the wolf in brush and had to find her by movement, the flick of a tail, the pale shape of a shoulder turning between black trunks. Each time she reappeared farther up the line they needed to check. Below, sirens changed tone, another ambulance arriving. The noise made the wolf flinch, but not bolt. She seemed tethered to this slope by purpose, stronger than fear. Halfway up, Steve's radio cracked alive with Danvers' voice. Wild One status. Still tracking, no contact issues. You're at 7 minutes. Need 3 more. You had 8. Then call it 10 and blame me later. There was a beat of silence long enough that Steve thought Danvers might order them down. Instead, 2 minutes. Barlow muttered. That's his compromise voice. They reached a small shelf where the path widened around a stump. From there, Steve could see over the road through gaps in timber. Light bars flashing, people moving ant-like around the wreck. Cameras at the barricade catching every strobe-lit second. The whole county was probably watching by now. The wolf had stopped again, above a tangle of brush and collapsed branches that looked like storm blowdown. She didn't enter it. She stood rigid at the edge, head low, eyes pinned on Steve. Then she barked twice, faster this time. From downslope, faint and easily mistaken for wind, came a sound like someone calling through cupped hands. Barlow snapped his head. You hear that? Steve held up a hand. They listened. Nothing. Just rain and sirens and his own pulse in his ears. Barlow shook his head. Could be a fox. Could be! Radio traffic cut him off, urgent and overlapping. Command from Volunteer Team 2. Possible update on prints near Ditch Road. Danvers. Go ahead. Male voice. Winded. Those prints we flagged? Negative juvenile. They match Deputy Corbyn's tread. Repeat. False lead. A curse bled through an open mic. Another voice piled on, higher, shaken. Also, Team 2 heard crying from above the road cut. Couldn't get bearing in this weather. Sounded upslope, not creekside. Steve and Barlow looked at each other. Command, Steve said into his radio, already moving toward the brush pile. Confirm that traffic. Danvers came back instantly now. No skepticism left. Only command urgency. Confirmed. All units, shift secondary teams to upper road cut. Wild One, hold position and mark your location. Negative, Steve said. I'm on probable source now. Fletcher. But Steve had already slid down the slick edge toward the tangle where the wolf stood guard. The brush looked natural from 10 feet away and engineered from 2. Alder limbs had collapsed over a shallow depression, making a roof that hid what lay beneath. Steve pushed branches aside with his forearm and light. Mud sloughed down in wet clumps. Underneath, dark concrete curved away into a culvert mouth half choked with debris and old leaves. There it was, old infrastructure everyone had stopped seeing. Jesus, Barlow whispered behind him. That was here. Maintenance line, Steve said, probably tied to runoff from the old cut blocks. He dropped to one knee at the opening and angled his light inside. The chamber widened after the first 4 feet, a low concrete throat running under the slope toward the ditch system. Broken branches and road trash had jammed near the entrance. Plastic, metal fragments, clotted leaves. And just beyond the jam, wedged between a broken pallet board and a stone lip, lay a small shape in a soaked blue jacket. Eli, Steve shouted. Eli Mercer, can you hear me? The shape twitched. A thin voice answered from the dark. ragged and shaking. "Mom!" Steve's chest tightened so hard it hurt. "Hey, buddy. My name is Steve. I'm with rescue. You're okay. We found you." A weak sob. "I can't get out." "I know. Don't move yet. Stay still for me, okay?" He scanned fast. Eli was on his side, one leg trapped under debris at a bad angle. Not blood everywhere. Good sign. But the right lower leg looked wrong in the flashlight beam, twisted and swelling. His hands were bare, fingers grey-pale and trembling. His cheek was streaked with mud and tears. The dinosaur blanket was bunched under his shoulder, soaked and half frozen. Behind Steve, the wolf shifted but didn't approach. He glanced back. She stood about 20 yards away on the path, perfectly still now, ears forward, tail neutral. Not a lunge posture, not retreat, a boundary marker, as if to say, "There, you finally looked there." "Command, Wild One," Steve said, voice breaking once before he steadied it. "Child located. Repeat, child located, alive. Upper road cut maintenance culvert, approximately 60 vertical feet above marker 41. For a heartbeat, the entire channel went silent. Then everything exploded. "Say condition." "Medic team move now." "Need rope package at rail break." Danvers cut through them all. "Wild One, secure scene. Do not attempt extraction alone. I'm sending paramedics and technical rescue." "Copy. Child conscious, hypothermic, possible right leg fracture or dislocation entrapped by debris. Airway clear." He set the tranquilizer rifle down outside the culvert and crawled in on elbows until his shoulders nearly touched both walls. Cold water soaked through instantly. Eli flinched at the movement. Hey, it's okay," Steve said softly. "I'm just coming close so you can see me." The boy's eyes were huge in the light. "Is there a wolf?" Steve followed his gaze past his own shoulder to the entrance where grey fur moved like a shadow in sleet. "There is," he said. "She's staying back. She's not going to hurt you." Eli shivered violently. "I heard her." "What did you hear?" "She kept making barks, loud, then cars." Steve swallowed. "Yeah, she did good." Barlow was on the radio behind them, relaying coordinates with shaking precision. "Mark this from sheared post, 15 yards upslope to maintenance path, then 30 east to culvert chamber. Needle-it route, it's slick as hell." Down below, people were already crashing through brush, voices climbing toward them. Steve reached carefully, touching Eli's shoulder first so he wouldn't startle. "I'm going to put this around you." He pulled a foil hypothermia wrap from his pack and tucked it over the boy's chest and arms, leaving the trapped leg untouched. "You keep talking to me. Tell me your favorite dinosaur." Eli's teeth chattered. "A Allosaurus." "Strong choice, better than T-Rex, honestly." A tiny, shaky laugh came out as a cough. At the entrance, the wolf gave one more short bark toward the lower slope where rescuers were approaching, then stepped backward into the dark trees, still within sight, but farther off. She paced once, stopped, watched. Barlow leaned close to Steve. "You see this? She's still here." "I see it. What do we do if command orders her dropped now that teams are coming up?" Steve looked from Eli's trembling face to the grey shape beyond the brush. Every instinct from years in this job told him situations collapse when too many frightened people and too much noise hit a tight space. One rifle crack, one panicked rush, one wrong move on that trapped leg, everything could go bad fast. He keyed his mic before anyone else could make that call. "Command Wild One with advisory. Wolf remains in area, non-contact acting as perimeter. Recommend no lethal engagement near culvert. I repeat, no gunfire in this sector during extraction." Danvers answered, breath loud, probably climbing. "Understood. Less lethal only unless immediate threat." Not perfect, but enough for now. Steve settled deeper into the culvert beside Eli, bracing one hand against cold concrete, the other on the boy's shoulder so he'd feel a human anchor in the dark. Outside, headlamps bobbed closer through sleet. Ropes clinked. Medics shouted for space. And in the timber above them, the wolf held her distance, watchful and silent, while Steve understood with startling clarity that the mission had changed. Finding Eli had been one fight, getting him out alive without turning fear into violence, against the child, against the animal, against each other, would be the next. Headlamps broke through the trees in a staggered line. Paramedics first, then 2 fire rescue techs with rope bags, then Lieutenant Harper with a trooper on his shoulder, and authority written in every step. "Where is he?" the lead medic called. "Inside, 10 feet, Steve answered, backing out of the culvert enough to make room. "Conscious, hypothermic, right leg trapped under pallet board and stone lip. Don't yank anything." The medic dropped to her knees beside him, visor pearled with sleet. "Tess Alvarez," she said, "all business." "Eli, honey, I'm Tess. I'm going to help warm you up." At Eli's name, Barlow's shoulder mic crackled with a patched channel from the crash treatment area. Lena's voice raw and cracking through static. "Eli, baby, Mommy's here." Eli tried to lift his head, panic flaring. "Mom." "Don't move," Tess said gently, already threading a pediatric temp probe under his arm. "You can hear her, that's good. Keep looking at me." Harper shined his light past Steve toward the timber. "Where's the wolf?" Barlow pointed with his chin. "Up a path, 20 yards. Holding." "Not for long," Harper said. He turned to the trooper beside him. "Beanbag ready." Steve stood up too fast and banged his shoulder on concrete. "Negative. Sheriff said no gunfire in this sector." "Beanbag isn't gunfire," Harper snapped. "It sounds like gunfire to a 6-year-old trapped in a pipe." "It sounds like control to a scene spiraling on live television." As if to prove him right, a producer's voice crackled over someone's open scanner from below. "We're hearing rescuers are pinned by a wolf above mile marker." Harper's jaw clenched. "Every minute this drags, more civilians show up. You want a bystander shot because we let a predator loiter in our extraction lane?" Steve stepped into his line of sight. "It isn't in the lane. You push it now, it might cross through ropes and medics." Danvers' voice came over the command channel, breathless, climbing. "Status at culvert." Harper keyed first. "Lieutenant Harper, child located, extraction being set. Wolf remains proximate. Request authorization for immediate, less lethal displacement." Steve grabbed his own mic. "Wild one. Recommend hold. Animal is static and outside working radius." A beat. Then Danvers. "No discharge unless animal closes on personnel. Hold for now." Harper lowered his radio slowly, eyes never leaving Steve. "For now," he echoed. Behind them, the wolf paced once along the path and stopped, ears flicking at every shouted command. Her body had gone tight as drawn wire. Fire rescue set anchors around 2 fir trunks and rigged a low-angle line to the culvert mouth. Tess got a warmed oxygen mask over Eli's face and tucked heat packs in his armpits and groin, hands quick and precise, despite the cold. Steve took Eli's left hand and kept talking about dinosaurs while the techs assessed the trap. "Boards wedged under concrete lip," one tech said. "If we pull wrong, we torque the leg." "Can we lift the lip?" Tess asked. "Not with muscle. Need a compact spreader." "That's down at engine 1, Barlow said. "Then move," Harper barked, and a firefighter slid back down the slope for tools. The stakes were simple and brutal now. If command forced the wolf and triggered chaos, they could lose both an animal and a child. If they moved too slowly, hypothermia and crush injury would take Eli anyway. Every choice ate something. The wolf gave one low bark, not the sharp alert from before, more a warning rumble split into sound. Steve looked up. She was staring downslope toward the roadblock, not at the rescuers. He keyed Danvers again. "Sheriff, you need tighter perimeter at the bottom. Animals reacting to something below." "Working on it," Danvers said. "We've got press and civilians crowding tape." "Then clear them." "Trying." The word hung there. Trying. Not doing. Not done. The spreader arrived 5 minutes later, and those 5 minutes cost what little thermal cushion Eli had left. Tess read the monitor and swore softly. "Temp 93.8. He's dropping." Eli's shivering had weakened into fine tremors, the dangerous phase. His lips were fading from blue to that waxy grey Steve had seen on winter recoveries. He never forgot. "Stay with me, bud," Steve said. "Tell me another dinosaur." Eli stared past him. Keek cold. "I know." The rescue tech worked the spreader jaws into the debris gap, metal grinding concrete with a shriek that made everyone flinch. "On my count, 2 millimeters at a time." They lifted. The stone lip shifted. For half a second, hope. Then the pallet board snapped, and the broken end shifted deeper, jamming Eli's boot harder against the culvert floor. Eli screamed, a sound so thin and shocked it seemed to cut the air itself. "Stop! Stop!" Tess shouted. "Abort lift." The tech released pressure instantly, but the setback was immediate. Monitor tones climbed, Eli's pulse spiked, and his breathing went ragged with pain and panic. Tess's voice dropped into that calm register medics use when terror has no practical value. "Perfusion check now. I need additional pain control prepared and warm fluids ready." Steve's stomach dropped. This was the failure he'd been trying to outrun. Not a missed clue, not bad optics, mechanics and flesh and physics refusing to cooperate. Harper crouched at the entrance, impatience edged with fear. "Can we move him or not?" "Not like this," Tess said without looking up. "If we yank, we make this entrapment worse." His temp's crashing. "I can read a monitor, Lieutenant." Barlow, anchoring the rope line above, lost footing as sleet turned to freezing pellets. He slipped, slammed into a stump, and cried out. The main belay held, but Barlow's left arm dangled wrong when he tried to stand. "Shoulders out," he hissed through clenched teeth. Great. One deputy down, one line captain scrambling to replace him, slope getting slicker by the minute. Danvers reached them then, hat gone, face wet and pale. He took in Eli, the monitor alarms, the failed lift, Barlow's arm, and for the first time looked older than his rank. "Options," Tess answered first. "We stabilize in place, warm him aggressively, cut debris around leg with handsaw, then slide a pediatric vacuum splint under before any movement. It'll be slow." "How slow?" 20 to 30 minutes if nothing else goes wrong." Danvers looked at the dark sky, then at Steve. And the wolf? Still there. Still just beyond the work lights, now half hidden behind brush, watching every motion. Steve opened his mouth, but Harper cut in. "This is exactly why we clear it now. More personnel arriving, narrower margins, and we're one panic event from catastrophe." Danvers hesitated too long. Harper took it as permission. He signaled the trooper with the beanbag shotgun. "One round into dirt short of her. Move her uphill." "Don't," Steve said. The trooper fired. The blast cracked across the slope like a centerfire shot. Dirt kicked up short, but rock amplified the impact into a concussive slap that echoed in the culvert. Eli convulsed with panic, yanking against his trapped leg. Tess swore and clamped both hands to keep him still. The wolf exploded sideways through brush, not uphill but across the path, vanishing into timber with a crashing sound that set everyone shouting at once. "Visual lost. Hold your lines. Eli, look at me, look at me." Steve rounded on Harper. "You just made it worse." Harper shouted back, but the words were swallowed by radio traffic and Eli's ragged sobbing. The one constant indicator Steve had relied on was gone into darkness, and trust on the slope went with it. That couldn't be fixed in a minute, maybe not tonight. Tess pressed gauze against Eli's pant leg and counted his breaths aloud so he'd mirror her rhythm. In the blur of commands and rain, she felt the old fracture inside herself open again. She had met Steve 6 years earlier over a sedated mountain lion and a broken snow machine trail, both of them young enough to think competence could protect people from randomness. They had lasted through wildfire seasons, through midnight call-outs, through too much coffee and too little sleep, until last winter a boy in another county froze during a delayed extraction, while Tess waited for a supervisor to authorize a risky move. She had followed protocol. The boy had died anyway. After that, every paused decision sounded like that mother's scream in her head. Steve had understood too well and not enough. He pushed when she froze. She froze when he pushed. They never had a cinematic breakup. Just shorter calls, separate shifts, a toothbrush gone from his sink. Now she was kneeling in freezing runoff beside him, hands bracing a 6-year-old's injured leg through torn denim. And every fear she'd buried came back with teeth. Not just losing Eli, but losing Steve, to the way he stepped between systems and consequences like his body was expendable collateral. She leaned close to Eli's ear. "Listen to me, sweetheart. You are not in trouble. Your body is cold and scared, but it's fighting for you. I need you to fight with it." He whimpered, "I want to go home." "I know, me too." She glanced at Steve, mud-streaked face, soaked jacket, one gloved hand steady on Eli's shoulder as if sheer will could anchor chaos. He met her eyes for half a beat. No argument there, just tired recognition of how thin the margins were. Quietly, so only he could hear, she said, "If this turns and they ask you to choose, you save the kid first. Don't be noble about the wolf." Steve didn't answer right away. Then, "I'm trying not to lose either." That's not always on offer. The words came out harsher than she intended, but they were true in the way truths often are when spoken from old wounds. She looked back to Eli before Steve could respond, because she couldn't afford to unravel here. Above them, someone called that a second warming blanket was coming up. Over the patched medical channel, Lena said Eli's name again, weaker now under pain meds. Tess swallowed hard and felt, with humiliating clarity, that she wanted impossible things at once. The child breathing, the wolf alive, Steve safe, and a world where competence could guarantee outcomes. She had lived long enough in rescue to know that world did not exist. Still, she adjusted Eli's oxygen mask, checked pupil response, and kept her voice steady. "Hey, Eli, when we get you out, I'm putting you in the loudest ambulance in Montana. You can complain the whole ride." A small nod, a tiny thread of trust. It would have to be enough. By the time they finished sawing through the remaining pallet slat, sleet had thickened into stinging ice. Gloves went numb. Headlamps haloed white in the precipitation. Commands had to be shouted twice. Vac splint in. "On 3, micro-lift." 1, 2, 3, Eli cried out, but this time his leg came free. Tess and Steve immobilized it in one practiced motion, foam hissing as the splint sealed. They slid him onto a pediatric sked, wrapped him in thermal layers, and clipped him into the hall system. "Ready to raise," the rope tech called. "Slow and level," Tess warned. "No jerks." As they started the lift, Danvers' radio erupted with new traffic from the lower barricade. "Command, North Tape. Civilian breach in a red Ford. Repeat breach. Moving toward inner closure." Another unit. Driver armed. Looks like long gun. Danvers spun toward the sound. How the hell did he get through? No one answered before the first shot cracked from below. Not beanbag, not less lethal. A rifle report, sharp and unmistakable, ricocheting off wet asphalt and timber. Every body on the slope flinched. The rope line shuddered. Eli screamed through his oxygen mask. And from the darkness to Steve's left, the wolf burst back into view at a dead run, bolting down slope toward the gunfire. The rope line jerked again as heads snapped toward the shot. "Hold tension," Harper yelled. Eli's sked swung 6 inches off axis, scraped concrete, and Tess threw her weight against it to steady him. "Don't stop lifting," she shouted. "If we stall here, he crashes." The wolf was already a grey streak between trunks gone down slope. Steve's body moved before his mind finished the equation. Gunfire below. Armed civilian inside perimeter. Panicked wolf running straight into lights and people. One bad second and somebody would die. He grabbed Harper's sleeve hard enough to spin him. "Your line command now. Keep that kid moving." Harper bristled. "Where the hell are you going?" "To end this before it climbs up here." Steve snatched his tranquilizer rifle from the mud, checked the dart with one thumb and looked at Tess. Their eyes locked. Rain ran off her brow. "Go," she said, voice flat with fear and trust. "I've got Eli." He was already moving. He half slid, half ran down the maintenance path, boots skidding in wet leaves, one hand on saplings to keep from cartwheeling into the ravine. Radio chatter hammered his ear. "North tape to command. Suspect male exited Red Ford, carrying bolt-action rifle. Units converge, but watch backdrop. We've got responders on slope." Danvers cut in. "No one fires unless target ID is clean. Repeat, no one fires blind." Another shot cracked. Lower this time from near the roadblock. Steve burst through vine maple and hit the shoulder at a run. The crash scene below looked like a shaken snow globe of light. Strobes, headlights, camera rigs, people shouting over one another. A red Ford pickup sat crooked against a barricade, driver door open. 30 yards ahead, a heavy-set man in a waxed canvas jacket stood in the road with a scoped hunting rifle shouldered toward the ditch. His face was red and wet, beard matted with sleet. He worked the bolt with shaking urgency and fired again into darkness. "Hey!" Steve bellowed. "Cease fire!" The man swung, muzzle flashing toward Steve for a heartbeat, before dropping half an inch. "Get out of my line. It's right there." "I said cease fire." "You people let it near a missing kid," the man shouted. "I'm not waiting for your paperwork." Steve recognized him then. Wade Grinnell, rancher from the West Bench, 24 calves, 3 complaints in spring about wolves in the draw, 1 investigation that turned out to be feral dogs. Not a stupid man, a scared one with a rifle and an audience. 2 deputies were trying to flank from behind cruisers, but their lanes were bad with responders everywhere. Cameras beyond the tape were still rolling, lights glaring white through sleet. Steve angled his body between Wade and the slope, palms out, dart rifle slung low. "Wade, look at me. Right now." Wade's nostrils flared. "Move. You fire uphill and you hit medics." She went uphill. She went through. There's a child extraction line above you. Wade's jaw twitched. "That animal's the reason we're in this mess." "No," Steve said, voice like a stake driven into mud. "A rollover is why we're in this mess. You firing blind is how it becomes a funeral." For a second, Wade's eyes flickered, not convinced, but listening. Then a shape moved near the plow blade, the wolf, low and fast, trying to cross back toward the timber. Wade jerked the rifle up. Steve lunged. The shot went off into the plow's steel edge with a screaming ricochet. Steve hit Wade at the shoulders, both men slamming into the slush. The rifle spun, skittered under a trooper's cruiser. Wade drove an elbow into Steve's ribs and tried to scramble up, cursing. "Get off me!" Steve locked one arm around Wade's chest from behind and dragged him away from where the rifle had gone. "Barlow, rifle!" he shouted, then remembered Barlow was injured upslope. "Any unit, secure that weapon." A trooper dove, came up with the rifle, bolt open, and backed away. Wade bucked hard, boots kicking. "You don't know what they do to stock. You don't know." "I know exactly what they do," Steve grunted, hauling him to his knees. "I also know what panic does. You just fired into active rescue." Wade went still for one startled beat, hearing maybe for the first time the screaming radios, the shouted "child online," the medic commands from above. Then he twisted and spat. "Should have put that wolf down an hour ago." "Maybe," Steve said, "but you don't get to decide that on my road with my people in the backstop." Deputies reached them, pulled Wade's arms behind him, cuffed him as he kept shouting about calves, government tags, kids waiting at bus stops. He didn't stop fighting when they walked him toward a cruiser. He planted his boots and forced them to drag him the last few feet. Danvers came in hot from the command truck, face thunderous. "Who authorized that man through my barricade?" No one answered fast enough. "Find out," Danvers snapped, then turned to Steve. "You good?" Steve sucked one breath, felt the bruise blooming in his ribs, and nodded once. Then he looked up the slope and saw the wolf. She had stopped midway between road and culvert, trapped in a corridor of noise. Floodlights stabbed from below. Headlamps bobbed above where Eli's team was hauling. People shouted on both sides. The wolf wheeled left, right, ears flat, muzzle open in stress, panting. She started upslope toward the extraction line. "Damn it," Steve whispered. He scooped his tranquilizer rifle from the slush where it had fallen in the tackle, thumbed safety off. This was the line he'd tried to avoid all night. But now, every variable was poison. One panicked leap into ropes and personnel, one deputy with bad judgment, one terrified volunteer swinging a tool. He moved 10 paces forward into open road, lowering his profile so he was the first thing the wolf saw. "Easy, girl," he said under his breath. She saw him, hesitated, then juked upslope again as another siren wailed. No more time. Steve planted his feet, led by half a body length, and fired. The dart struck high in her right hindquarter with a soft, ugly thwip. She spun, snapped at the shaft, then bolted 20 yards into brush before slowing, legs stiffening. Tranquilizers weren't magic, they were chemistry and minutes. Bad minutes. "Track her!" Steve shouted. "No one crowd her!" He followed at a controlled jog, eyes on gate, first overcorrection, then head bob, then hindquarters dropping as the drug hit. She stumbled against a log, tried to rise, failed and folded onto her sternum, breathing hard. Steve knelt several yards away, speaking low, watching for a paradoxical surge. She blinked heavily, ears twitching once. Then her chin settled into wet needles. He timed respirations on his watch. 12. 12 again. "Sedation achieved," he called, voice shaking despite himself. "Need crate and vet transport now. She's not to be euthanized. Repeat, not euthanized." From uphill came a new shout, cutting through everything. "Child clear. We're clear." Steve closed his eyes for 1 second in the sleet. When he opened them, Danvers was standing beside him, chest heaving. The sheriff looked from the sedated wolf to the flashing scene below, to Wade being stuffed into a cruiser and still yelling. "Hell of a night, Fletcher," Danvers said. Steve kept counting breaths. "Not done yet." They weren't done. The antagonism had shifted, not vanished. Wade Grinnell kicked the cruiser door from inside hard enough to rattle glass and screamed through the crack in the partition while deputies tried to process a dozen disasters at once. "You can't charge me for protecting people," he shouted as Danvers approached. "Ask anyone. That thing was coming at the road." Danvers opened the rear door halfway, snowmelt dripping off his cuffs. You breached a law enforcement perimeter and discharged a rifle into an active rescue. You're being booked. Wade lunged against his belt restraints, face inches from Danvers. Book me then, and when it kills a kid next month, you can book yourself. Danvers didn't flinch. Take him. As deputies shut the door, Wade twisted to glare at Steve on the slope. You picked it over us. Steve straightened, soaked to the skin, tranquilizer rifle hanging loose at his side. No, he said. I picked not making tonight worse. Wade barked a bitter laugh that turned almost feral. You think this ends tonight? It almost didn't. Up the slope, where Eli's sked was nearing the rail break, a volunteer lost footing and the line slewed toward a snag. Harper cursed and grabbed rope bare-handed. Tess dropped to one knee beside Eli, shielding his leg from impact. Reset anchor! Reset! She yelled. Steve sprinted uphill again, lungs burning. Halfway up, he heard news shouting below. Two men near the news vans arguing with deputies, one waving his phone and yelling about wolf cover-up. Rumor had mutated in real time, metastasizing with every live shot. Danvers' command voice cut through channel chaos. Shut down all civilian access now. I don't care if they're press, council, or Christ himself. At the rail break, Steve jumped into the rope team, took tension where Barlow couldn't with his injured shoulder, and helped walk Eli's sked the last 10 feet to level ground. Tess climbed with it, mask fogging, gloves slick with blood and rain. Ambulance, she shouted. Move. The doors opened. Warmth and light spilled out. They loaded Eli, Tess, and a second medic jumping in with him. Steve started to step back, but Eli's small hand shot from the blankets and caught his sleeve. Wolf lady, Eli whispered through chattering teeth. Steve leaned in. Yeah? Don't let them hurt her. Steve swallowed. I won't. The doors slammed. Siren rose. The ambulance cut through the blockade and disappeared into sleet. Only then did Steve let himself look for the wolf transport team. Wildlife Crate arrived on the flatbed 10 minutes later with Dr. Annika Rao, county contract veterinarian, climbing down with a headlamp and a case of monitoring gear. She knelt by the wolf, checked pupils, gums, heart, then frowned at the collar under the wet fur. Hold this light. She wiped mud from the metal plate. Well, that's interesting. What? Steve asked. Old telemetry collar, Wyoming study code. She squinted. 2 years old, maybe more. She's been in management hands before. Harper, standing nearby with rope burns across both palms, gave a humorless snort. Great. Celebrity wolf. Dr. Rao ignored him. She's stressed but healthy. Minor lacerations, elevated temperature. We reverse sedation at facility after exam. Facility, Harper said. Not a bullet? The vet looked up, cold as the weather. Not unless someone here wants to explain to state wildlife why we destroyed a collared female that never made contact. Harper held her stare, then looked away first. That was one antagonism losing ground, the reflex to neutralize anything complicated. The other sat in the back of a cruiser, still shouting. When deputies brought Wade out for transfer paperwork, he was quieter, spent rage turning to something uglier. Humiliation in front of cameras. He fixed on Steve one last time. You think you won tonight, Wade said, voice hoarse. County'll hang you when ranch losses hit. Steve met him without heat. Maybe, but Eli's alive and no one died on this road. I can live with the hearing. Wade's shoulders sagged just a fraction, as if the fight had finally found bone. He didn't apologize. He didn't recant. He just let deputies guide him away, boots dragging through slush. Earned, not clean. Behind them, Dr. Rao and Steve guided the sedated wolf into the transport crate, securing straps as gently as if handling glass. She was heavy, all muscle and soaked winter coat, breath fogging in short bursts against metal mesh. When the door latched, Steve rested his forehead against the cold steel for one breath. From the dark beyond the road cut came the fading siren carrying Eli towards surgery. At St. Catherine's, everything smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee, and nobody on night shift looked surprised by mud-streaked responders dripping in the corridor at 2 a.m. Lena Mercer was out of imaging, scalp stapled, arm in a temporary sling, blanket around her shoulders. She stood the second she saw Tess and Steve enter the family consult room. "Where is he?" Tess answered first. "OR prep now. Leg fracture with entrapment injury. Probable surgical fixation. Mild frostbite hands and cheek. Temp is coming up. He was talking in the ambulance." Lena's knees buckled with relief, and she sat hard on the vinyl chair, hands over her mouth. A strangled laugh turned into tears. "Talking." "He asked for his Allosaurus," Steve said. She looked at him through tears. "You heard him?" "I did." Lena reached for his hand with both of hers, squeezing hard. "Thank you for not stopping." Before he could answer, Danvers stepped into the room, hat in hand, suddenly more human than sheriff. "Mercer, I owe you an update and maybe an apology. We had complications at the scene. Your son is alive because teams adapted fast." Lena wiped her eyes. "And the wolf?" Danvers glanced at Steve, then back. "Sedated, alive, in veterinary care." She nodded once, fierce despite the tremor in her jaw. "Good." The room went quiet, not because there was nothing left to say, but because the adrenaline had finally burned down and left them all with the weight of what had almost happened. Barlow appeared in the doorway with his arm in a sling, looking sheepish and proud at once. "Our nurse said they'll update in 45. "Sit down, Nate," Tess ordered automatically. He did. Steve leaned against the wall and felt every bruise register at once. Ribs, shoulder, knees. He watched Tess across the room as she peeled off bloody gloves and flexed cramped fingers. She caught him looking. After a moment, she jerked her chin toward the hall. "Come on." They stepped out into the dim vending machine glow, away from radios and gratitude and command voices. For the first time all night, no one was shouting for either of them. "Your ribs?" Tess asked. "Probably just bruised." "You say that like a diagnosis." He gave a tired half smile. "Occupational optimism." She didn't smile back. "You ran into a man with a rifle." "I ran at the problem nearest catastrophic." "Don't do incident language with me." He let out a breath. "Okay. I was scared he'd shoot someone and I moved." Tess folded her arms, then unfolded them, restless. "I watched you go and I hated you for about 3 seconds." Steve blinked. "That specific?" 3, maybe 4. Her voice wavered despite her effort. "Because it felt like last winter all over again. You sprinting toward danger, me holding pressure on a kid and waiting to find out which body they bring back." He looked down at his muddy boots. "Tess, no, let me finish." She pressed fingers to her eyes, then dropped her hand. "When that boy died in Ravalli, I told myself it was protocol, weather, bad luck. But part of me still thinks if I'd broken rank earlier, he might have lived. Tonight, when Harper fired that beanbag and Eli screamed, I was right back there." She swallowed. "And then I saw you choose again. Not safe, not career protecting, just right." He leaned against the wall beside her, shoulder almost touching. "I didn't choose cleanly. I sedated her." "You sedated her to keep her alive. And to keep everyone else from doing worse." She turned to face him fully. "Exactly." Silence settled, softer than the one in the consult room. A janitor pushed a mop bucket past, humming under his breath. Steve spoke first, quieter. "When we split, I told myself it was schedules and stress. But truth, I didn't know how to come home from nights like this without dumping it all on you or shutting you out, usually both. Tess let out a tired laugh. I'm not easy to come home to either. I never said you were. I know. She looked at him, eyes red-rimmed and steady. I freeze when decisions get political. You charge when they get stupid. We hit those edges and call it incompatibility, like we're a bad puzzle. We are a bad puzzle. Maybe, she said. But tonight in that culvert, with you talking dinosaurs and me cursing at monitor leads, it didn't feel incompatible. It felt like the only reason that kid got out. He stared at her. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I'm tired of pretending distance is safer. Her voice dropped. I love you, Steve. I didn't stop because we signed separate lease addendums. I stopped saying it out loud because loving you felt like volunteering for grief. He closed his eyes for a beat, jaw working. When he opened them, there was no deflection left. I love you too, and I'm tired of acting like competence is a substitute for connection. She stepped closer, close enough their jackets brushed. Then we do this differently. How? Rules, she said, practical even now. Real ones, after-action honesty within 24 hours. No disappearing into shifts, no martyr routines. Therapy if needed, not optional. And when one of us says, I'm at my limit, the other believes it. A laugh escaped him, cracked, but real. You're negotiating a relationship like an incident command plan. It's what I've got. It's good, he said. I can do rules. She searched his face another second, as if checking for the old retreat. Finding none, she leaned in and kissed him, brief, cold lips warming fast. Not dramatic, not performative, a decision. When she pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. I thought I lost this. You did, she said softly. Now earn it. He nodded once. Deal. A nurse opened the consult room door. Family of Eli Mercer. Surgeons ready to update. Tess squeezed Steve's hand once, then let go and straightened. Come on, partner, she said, and this time the word held. Morning came thin and blue over the valley. In a small conference room off the OR wing, Dr. Patel set down imaging films and spoke plain. Spiral tib-fib fracture. Surgical fixation successful. Circulation preserved. Frostbite superficial. Prognosis good. Lena cried openly this time. Barlow wiped his eyes and pretended he had something in them. Danvers exhaled like a man setting down a weight he'd carried too long. 2 days later, Steve stood in the county wildlife facility while Dr. Rao scanned the wolf's collar again. The metal tag read, WY2F174, and the chipped epoxy told a story of fences, winters, and miles crossed. She's 2, maybe 2.5, Rao said. No sign she's habituated to people. Cortisol's elevated from the incident, but no infectious issues. We'll relocate to managed habitat north of the Selway boundary at first light. Steve nodded. I'm going. Rao arched a brow. As observer, not cowboy. As observer. At the sheriff's operations room that same afternoon, Danvers stood before a whiteboard while command staff shifted in their chairs. Harper's palms were bandaged. Wade Grinnell's booking photo sat clipped to the corner of a report stack. Danvers tapped the board where someone had written in black marker, Animal Behavior Anomaly, Missing Person Ops. Effective immediately, he said. Any unusual, repeated wildlife behavior at a search scene gets logged and evaluated by wildlife response before neutralization is considered. Not after. Before. A sergeant frowned. You're formalizing this because of one wolf? Danvers looked around the room. I'm formalizing it because a 6-year-old is alive. No one argued after that. At dawn the next day, Steve rode in the passenger seat of a state wildlife truck. As frost smoked off the dirt road near the release zone, pines stood black against a pale sky. Tess sat behind him in her off-duty jacket, thermos between her knees, eyes tired but awake. "You know you didn't have to come," Steve said. She snorted. "Like I'd miss this." Rao opened the crate door with a long pull line and stepped back. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the wolf rose, shook once, and looked straight at them, amber eyes clear. The old collar caught dawn light like a ring of dull silver. "Go on," Rao murmured. The wolf trotted out, paused at the tree line, and turned her head once toward the road, as if marking them in memory, then vanished into timber without ceremony. Tess let out a breath she'd been holding. Steve realized his hand had found hers without either of them noticing. Weeks later, on a cold Saturday, Steve and Tess visited Eli in pediatric rehab. His leg was in a bright blue cast covered in marker drawings. He showed them a paper wolf cutout taped above his bed and announced he was naming his crutches Fang 1 and Fang 2. Lena hugged them both at the door. "He tells everyone a wolf yelled at the mountain until you listened." Steve smiled. Not the worst summary. That evening, as sun dropped behind the Bitterroots, he drove Highway 86 alone in his county truck. The cab still smelled faintly of wet canvas and old coffee, but there was fresh cedar from a new first aid kit Tess had bullied him into stocking properly. At mile marker 41, he slowed. New guardrail gleamed along the curve, galvanized steel catching dawn's last gold. Reflective posts stood straight and bright where the old break had been. The ditch road was clear. No strobes, no sirens, no shouting, just the soft hiss of tires on cold pavement and wind moving through fur. Steve rested his hand on the wheel and looked once up the dark slope where a hidden culvert mouth sat under brush. Nobody would overlook again. Then he drove on into the quiet. Both lives he had fought for still somewhere ahead in the same wide world.